The very first human experiment in Poppy Playtime's history wasn't an orphan they picked at random. Experiment 1006, the prototype, is Oliver, a boy adopted by Elliot Ludwig, Playtime Co.'s founder. Ludwig didn't just adopt him out of kindness. What he needed was a test subject to continue his work towards his real goal, bringing back his daughter who tragically passed away, Poppy. Oliver was the trial run. In a chapter 5 cassette tape, we hear the two of them speak directly, and Oliver knows exactly what he is. He tells Ludwig,
Ollie's gone and I'm a test run on the prototype.
He calls Ludwig out for only caring about Poppy, saying,
It was never about me, never about my better place. It was for her. She's all you talk about.
Ludwig tries to comfort him, offering to be a real family and even letting Oliver pick his own name. A fair trade-off, turned into a monster but you can pick your own name. That's crazy. Oliver's only question is, when can I meet her? The kid who became the most dangerous experiment in the factory started out just wanting to belong somewhere. Chapter 5's intro tape with the Wrong Side Automos commercial even briefly flashes the prototype's face over a child's, which could lead us to believe that this is Oliver and could be one of the kids that they were using for promotion. And with how much Mob Entertainment loves subtle foreshadowing and teases in Poppy Playtime, the shot here is hard to ignore. Unlike the bigger bodies that came after him, the prototype's body isn't fully engulfed as a toy. He's way more mechanical, running on poppy gel flowing through him instead of food, as he doesn't need to eat. His hands, we've been shown since the first chapter, give away interesting facts about him too. If you look at this x-ray of Poppy's hand from the tape in chapter 5, you can see the same style of joints that the prototype has as his hands, meaning he was built on some kind of endoskeleton base that they later refined and shrunk for experiments like Poppy. He was never the finished product, he was the blueprint, and somehow that blueprint became something that the inhabitants saw as a god, shaping the factory forever. Poppy wasn't created for the sake of science, she was created out of grief. Elliot Ludwig lost his daughter Poppy Ludwig in the 1960s, and he could not let her go. He'd go through hundreds of experiments trying to develop a way to bring her back, with his earliest breakthrough being on his desk in chapter 2, Experiment 814. We find a note where a rat was fed for 2 weeks, killed, submerged in a mixture of poppy flowers and submergative gel. A week later, they hit it with an electric shock to try and revive it. It didn't work, but the note says something larger might yield greater results. Ludwig had conducted over 800 experiments before this one. That man was chasing revival for years before he ever touched a human subject. Experiment 814 is believed to be the last animal test before Ludwig and Playtime Co. switched to people. That gel mixture became the foundation for everything, and it is exactly what Ludwig eventually used to bring back his daughter as Experiment 1007. The Poppy doll had already existed since 1950 as Playtime Co.'s best-selling toy for 34 consecutive years, but the experiment version was built from the remains of Elliot's actual daughter, Poppy Ludwig, born March 7th, 1949. Ludwig gave her the very first doll he ever made and said he saw a spark in her eye, like she'd been handed a whole new world. She spent most of her time in the factory with him, and interestingly, Ludwig's wife Molly had divorced him years before Poppy was even born, meaning Poppy herself may have been adopted too. She was the real inspiration behind the famous doll that sparked the rocket in business for Elliot's life's work. Elliot even had a room designed for her to look like a child's bedroom inside the factory, with a door that leads directly to his office. He wasn't home often, so he brought his home to her. This wasn't corporate research. This was a father who had refused to let go. What makes Poppy's story so complicated is what came about after the breakthrough of her creation along with the prototypes. She befriended Ollie without ever knowing he was the prototype, the experiment created right before her. The Hour of Joy was orchestrated with her knowledge, but she thought it was meant for freedom, not to be a slaughter. When she saw what really happened, she was horrified. After the massacre, Poppy actually stepped up and led the surviving toys to safe haven, telling them where to go and what to do, sparking a rebellion against the prototype. But the pressure broke her. She cracked, no pun intended, ran to her room crying, and the prototype found her there. He calls her a child, told her the orphans can never go free because we'll be left with nothing and infinity will be lonely, then carried her to her glass case and locked her inside while she screamed and begged him to stop. She stays trapped in that case for years until we showed up and freed her from it back in chapter 1. She's technically been alive for over 50 years, but as ex-mob employee Isaac pointed out, age doesn't make the experiments adults. She's one of the oldest characters in the game with the mind of a girl who never got a chance to grow up. Most experiments didn't get a choice in what happened to them. Quinn Davidson almost did, and it made everything so much worse. Quinn was an orphan in Playcare, like many experiments, but the one who caught the attention of Dr. Harley Sawyer for one reason: he was holding back. While the other kids gave their all during the game station tests, Quinn deliberately underperformed. Sawyer noticed, confronted him, and told him to give it everything he had on his next round. Quinn agreed. He scored top marks in both Huggy Wuggy and statues. The dude unlocked his hidden potential, proving he was exactly the kind of subject Playtime Co. wanted. In August 1990, Quinn became Experiment 1166, the bigger body version of Yarnaby, a lion toy originally released in the 1970s for a wildlife conservation campaign. Sawyer and Playtime Co. must have been excited after the test scores from Quinn, but this was still one of their earlier experiments and the methods weren't perfected yet. The intellect that was high enough to be faking test scores didn't survive the transfer. Yarnaby came out with no higher cognitive function. He couldn't speak, couldn't think like a person, and acted more like a dang animal than a human, which makes sense since he was turned into a lion. That clever kid was now a rainbow covered big cat who didn't even know his name. What Yarnaby did have was loyalty. He latched on to certain staff members in a way a dog would latch on to its owner, and Sawyer saw an opportunity. He had Yarnaby isolated from all contact except for himself, forcing Yarnaby to bond with him exclusively, and he saw Yarnaby become completely dependent on Sawyer, following his every command. Sawyer never actually cared about him. His notes describe Yarnaby as pathetic, amusing, but pathetic. He was seen as nothing but a tool. After Sawyer was removed from his position and turned into Experiment 1354, Yarnaby fell apart, but not at the seams. It was mentally. He stopped eating, he sulked in his cell and would attack anybody who got close to him that wasn't Sawyer. Dr. Carmine Makabe called him a failure by design. Then, during or after the Hour of Joy, the two were reunited and Yarnaby went right back to obeying Sawyer's every word. It said he even played fetch with the nightmare critters for his amusement. In chapter 4, we learn who let the dogs out as Sawyer sends Yarnaby out at us. He smashes in the windows and stalks us through the corridors. He proceeds to chase us down through the caves until we find a conveniently timed vat of molten metal. We swing across the chain hook and Yarnaby, with no brain, tries to keep chasing. He ends up biting the hook and catching fire from the lava pit below him and makes one final attempt to drag himself out before slipping back in. Quinn Davidson went from being a kid smart enough to trick the adults around him turned into an animal loyal to a man who never cared about him. Catnap's loyalty to the prototype didn't start after his transplant. It started when he was only 7 years old. Before he was Experiment 1188, his name was Theodore Granbell. Theo was just another orphan living in Home Sweet Home, who the other kids mostly ignored. Staff described him as antisocial, and he had a big imagination. He would speak a lot about having an imaginary friend who would lead him into doing very suspicious things around Playcare. Playcare. A drawing made by Theo shows him in purple sitting on his bed with an easily recognizable skeletal hand reaching out from underneath. That friend was not imaginary, that was the prototype. Prototype had escaped containment and was hiding somewhere in the factory. He needed someone on the outside to do things for him without raising suspicion, and finding the quiet kid with no friends, the prototype hit the jackpot. He had Theodore snoop through confidential documents for him, and when counselors caught him, he told them his friend told him to do it. Joel Sinclair, the head counselor, thought it was innocent. I mean, 7-year-old snooping around through confidential documents, he probably can't even understand half the words on the papers. He was just a lonely kid with an imaginary friend doing imaginary friend things. Nobody looked into it further. Then one day, the prototype had asked him to grab a leftover grab pack with the green hand attached and use it to open a maintenance door in Playcare. Theodore tried, but he was 7. His frontal lobe still wasn't fully developed. But during his attempt, the green hand electrocuted him and his heart stopped. With the door opened, the prototype had a clear exit. No cameras, no people. He could have walked out and nobody would have known. Instead, he carried Theodore back to the staff and gave up his own freedom to save him. On November 7th, 1990, Playtime Co. turned Theodore into Catnap, and his purpose was specific: to oversee Playcare, put children to sleep with the red smoke so scientists could take them for experiments. Then 13 days later, during his adjustment period, Catnap broke out of his cell because someone forgot to lock the door and killed 6 employees while injuring 8 more. The cat got out the bag and was not holding back. Even after becoming Catnap's bigger body, he still showed signs of remembering his life as Theodore. So they sent him to the labs for conditioning. They locked him in a room designed to reshape his identity. When he went in, he was saying, "My name is Theodore," and after 49 days, he came out saying, although if you listen closely, it sounds like he starts to say "the" as if he's about They may not have been able to erase him completely, or that was just fear of what they had done with the conditioning. Once integrated into Playcare, the kids were terrified of him at first. A giant purple cat showing up to your orphanage would do that, but within a month, most began to accept him. Some even considered him a friend. The real problem was his obsession with the prototype. Leith Pierre noted that Catnap followed him around like a lost puppy, and the prototype didn't seem to mind. Even Sawyer admitted Catnap's success rivaled even Huggy's, but his connection to the prototype was a flaw they couldn't fix. During a check-in with Leith Pierre in late 1994, Catnap stayed silent the entire interaction until he broke it with 5 words. He believed it. He believed it through the Hour of Joy, where he killed every worker in Playcare and threw a grown man across the room like a football. He believed it while stalking us through Chapter 3, dispensing red smoke and watching us hallucinate. He believed it in our boss fight with him, where he moved much slower than usual because the prototype told him not to kill us. And he believed it to the very end, when the prototype dropped from the ceiling with a light beaming down, almost like how Catnap thinks of him, and he reached for him. Catnap didn't run. He knelt, raised up his arms, and offered himself. The prototype accepted his offer and stabbed his fingers through his mouth and killed him instantly. Then he skinned him and draped his pelt over his back like a coat and took his stomach and red smoke for himself. Theodore gave everything to one person who ever saved him, and that person now wears him as an accessory. Let that sink in. Like, open the door, he been knocking. Bron is the only experiment who actually volunteered for this. Thomas Clark was a 59-year-old Playtime Co. employee who had worked there for 36 years as a pediatrician. When he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer, he figured out if he was gonna die soon anyway, he might as well leave a final mark on his spot in the world and allow himself to be used for the sake of science and become another experiment of his own free will. But many experiments don't end well. After the transfer, Thomas was severely disoriented. his mental testing dropped by half, and he probably didn't even know where he was. It went from bad to worse, as the other experiments could tell that something was off about him. All the other experiments had been orphans, and all children. Thomas was the first staff member to go through the process. The years of being tortured by the adults in the factory had built up a lot of anger, and Thomas had to hold all of it. Boxy Boo struck first and devoured his voice box and his thyroid, and it took another 12 hours of surgery just to stabilize him again. The man traded his terminal cancer for getting his throat eaten by a jack-in-a-box. After the attack, Playtime Co. had put him in solitary confinement to keep him safe, alone in a room with nothing to do. Following the hour of joy, the other toys jumped him and ripped him apart. Thomas had survived his cancer after transferring into Bron. He survived Boxy Boo taking a bite of his neck and survived the additional 12 hours of the surgery table and still ended up not making it. Before she was running the game station and stretching her arms across hallways, Mommy Longlegs was just another girl named Marie Payne. She was like Minnie, an orphan living in play care who suffered severe trauma and violent nightmares caused by Catnap's red smoke. Claire Harper, one of Playtime's counselors who cared about the orphans, and in this case Marie, had described finding her with dilated pupils, quivering lips, and blood that felt like it was boiling underneath her own skin. She was just a normal kid having a terrible time in a place that was meant to take care of her. In early 1991, the scientists would end up choosing Marie to become Experiment 1222, the first test subject for Playtime Co.'s newly developed elastic plastic. Unlike most experiments that were put into existing toy designs, Mommy's bigger body was created first. She became so popular with the children in the game station that Playtime Co. actually made a toy out of her afterward and sold it. She was the product, not the other way around. And with her popularity, it wasn't much of a stretch to start selling her as one. Mommy was hostile towards every adult in the building from jump. All staff were required to keep a 20-yard distance from her at all times. And Stella Graber even had to record intercom messages for the game station because no employee could get safely near her. But with the children, she was completely different. She called herself Mommy, acted as their protector, and even secretly told some of the orphans she would keep them safe. One worker had found out after interviewing one of the children. She knew exactly what was happening to the kids going through those games, and she was trying to stop it from the inside. Playtime Co. tried to calm her down by placing Experiment 1223 Daddy Longlegs in containment with her. The same strategy that worked with Kissy and Huggy. It failed. Mommy attacked him on sight, believing he could take her children away. It is heavily implied she killed him. During an interview with Jessica Newman, Mommy stayed silent for the first half and then started muttering the name Maria before growing aggressive and accusing the scientists of taking Maria away from her. Whether Maria was specifically someone she knew is more to be believed. It is a fragment of her broken mind's memory resurfacing and filling her with rage. During the hour of joy, Mommy participated fully. She grabbed employees in the game station, lifted them up, and dropped them to their deaths. She then stays in the game station alone for 10 whole years. No food, no children, no one to play with. A mob tweet said that Playtime Co. broke her long before the hour of joy, and a decade of isolation finished the job. By the time we showed up, the motherly act was barely even holding her together. She rigged every game to kill us, murdered Bunzo and the mini Huggies when they failed her. We kept stretching her patience. And when we finally escaped statues, she completely snapped. left. And with her last words, we were warned. As the grinder pulls her in, she screamed that the prototype would make her part of him. In chapter 3, we see her arm on Catnap's shrine, and in chapter 5, we see it grafted directly onto the prototype's body. The exact thing she feared came true. Most experiments conducted by Playtime Co. so far had been one person in one toy body. Doey was 3.
We're going to the Playtime factory?
That's right, honey.
Somebody stood up that camera!
Experiment 1322 was created from the minds and the bodies of 3 separate children, Jack Ayers, Kevin Barnes, and Matthew Hillard. Playtime Co. wanted an experiment that could fulfill multiple roles at once, and apparently the best solution they had was to cram 3 kids into 900 pounds of shape-shifting dough. Jack was the youngest and most innocent. His mom gave him a Doey the Doughman plushie for Christmas in 1992, along with an invitation to tour the Playtime Co. factory. During the tour, Jack wandered away from the group into the dough mixing facility, and with one of the worst parenting performances I've ever seen, he fell into one of the vats. 6 weeks later, Playtime Co. has sent his parents a letter saying their son could live. When Susan and George Ayers came back to see their son, the scientists walked them into a room and locked the door behind them, with a mentally unstable dough monster who'd been awake for less than a week. You can probably see where this is going. His mom apologized for not reaching him in time and told him she'd never leave him again, but the voice that responded wasn't Jack's, it was Kevin's. His father screamed for someone to open the door. Nobody did, and he killed both of Jack's parents while a scientist stood on the other side and did nothing. Then Jack's personality came back and all he could do was cry.
Mommy won't lie to you, Jackie. Mommy won't hurt you. I'd never hurt you.
Hey! Hey! Open this door! Susan! Please! Open the door! Please!
Kevin Barnes was the reason Doey was dangerous. A tape describes him as aggressive, confrontational, and prone to attacking his own friends during moments of intense play. Scientists warned that a single emotion spike from Kevin could turn every ounce of Doey against anyone nearby. So their brilliant idea of dealing with a kid like that, they put him in him anyway. Before becoming part of Doey, Kevin was already angry. He knew the scientists were lying to him, and a chapter 3 tape captures the moment perfectly. A scientist catches one of Kevin's friends sneaking in to check up on him and switches to a soft fatherly voice to explain that Kevin is very, very sick and they're trying to make him better, lying through his teeth the entire time. Kevin never forgot those gentle voices. Matthew Hillard was the oldest at 15 when he was orphaned after an accident killed his parents. We don't know exactly what happened, but we know he blamed himself for it, and that guilt filled him all the way to Doey. In Play Care, the other kids looked up to him. He broke up fights and everyone listened. Stella Graber herself said he shouldn't be put to waste. A note describes him as not the smartest or most physically gifted, but his charisma and kindness made up for everything. He was the glue holding the orphans together, and then Playtime Co. rolled him in the dough. After the hour of joy, Doey stepped up. When Poppy vanished from Safe Haven, Doey took over as leader. He told the surviving toys where to go and what to do. He even found the exit out the factory at one point, but turned around when he realized how much the other toys really needed him. He recorded a tape specifically to remind himself to stay. That's how close he came to leaving.
For a long while, we had Poppy to tell us, go here. Go there. Poppy was nice. Can't find Poppy anywhere. I don't know what happened or where she went. I could make for the exit. It's all I'd wanted for the longest time. But there are others inside. Others that aren't like me. I wanted to make this in case I ever doubt or forget that. Just play this and remember.
Then the prototype destroyed everything. He tricked us into rigging Safe Haven's generator, blowing up every toy inside of it thinking they were safe. Doey's family is gone again. Kevin's rage took over completely. 2 out of the 3 personalities agreed we were the enemy, and Doey transformed into a reptilian monster with 3 heads poking out his mouth. 2 looked sad, and the angry one was Kevin, because of course it is. In his final moments, after we crushed him with a hydraulic press ceiling shredder ceiling fan, Doey apologized twice. Once in Matthew's deep voice, once in Jack's small voice, and Kevin never said sorry.
Sorry.
Deep in the secondary labs, we hear the voices that don't belong to any experiment we've met. 3 orphans from Playcare who were turned into experiments with almost nothing left to tell their story. Experiment 1391 is labeled Cassie. Experiment 1395 is labeled Danny. Both names appear on screens in the labs with no toy, no backstory, and no real context. Just names attached to numbers in a place nobody was ever supposed to find.
I know you're scared. You're hurt. But this is Playcare. Your new home. You're safe here.
Okay.
We're here for you, Timmy. We always will be.
Experiment 1393 is a little different. We know the name is Timmy, an orphan from Playcare. In chapter 4, we hear someone in the secondary lab speaking to a boy with that name, likely a counselor trying to comfort him before whatever comes next. The experiment was created in 1994, and it's another Bron model, meaning Playtime Co. reused the same toy design for multiple kids, similar to the Smiling and Nightmare critters. Whatever happened to Timmy, Cassie, and Danny, the game hasn't told us yet. But the fact that their names are still in the system means Mob put them there for a reason. Lily Lovebraids is the only experiment we know of that was not directly created by Playtime Co., if you don't account for the Wrong Side Automos. She is a creation of the creation, made by the toys themselves as revenge. Before she was Experiment 1468, her name was Gracie Green, employee designation C2345. She was the lead counselor in Playtime Co.'s Wellness and Integration program. On the surface, she was bubbly, cheerful, and spoke to the children in a warm, animated voice. Underneath that, she was the person responsible for brainwashing every experiment into forgetting who they were. She ran the conditioning videos. She's the one who turned Theodore into Catnap, telling kids to repeat, "I am a toy. I've always been a toy." She made Huggy watch the brainwashing footage and do the dirty work of tossing many experiments into the bad toy box, which was just a nice way of saying meat grinder. She would baby talk these massive monsters into losing their real selves and destroying each other, and if any of the children resisted or misbehaved, the cheerful mask would slip and she would get very frustrated. As a human, she was even scarier than the monsters most of the time. The experiments remembered every second of it. During the hour of joy, Kickin' Chicken, Hoppy Hopscotch, and Baba Chops tracked her down while she was hiding. She tried barricading herself in a room and called security for help, only to hear the guard on the other end get killed mid-sentence.
Your friends are all here! Let's spread some joy all over that room!
You hear them?
Be the joy the world needs.
Another breach on 4. 40 meters. Closing.
Todd?
Oh, they're in the damn room. How are there so many of them?
Todd? Todd! Get back! Get back!
The toys broke in and dragged her away, but they didn't kill her. The prototype decided a quick death was too easy. Just like Thomas Clark, Gracie was an adult put into a toy body, but Thomas volunteered. Gracie was dragged in screaming, and while the other experiments attacked Thomas because he was staff, under the prototype's word, they kept Gracie alive specifically because she was. Death would have been mercy. The prototype wanted her to suffer.
Sink down and quiet. You are a toy. You have always been a toy.
I am a toy.
Beautiful, Miss Gracie.
I'm a good toy. I promise.
Are here to be joy.
They did to Gracie exactly what she did to them. Her brains and organs were transferred into a toy body, making her experiment 1468 Lily Lovebraids. Then they subjected her to her own conditioning tapes. The same videos, the same methods, the same cheerful voice telling her to forget who she was. Gracie resisted for 122 days, the longest anyone has ever held out against the conditioning. But eventually, under the prototype's watch, she broke completely.
My hands. Plastic. My face. I thought.
How embarrassing! I can't believe I thought you were actually in the room, Miss Gracie!
What came out the other side wasn't Gracie anymore. Lily had developed two conflicting identities, with one becoming an imaginary friend represented by a severed candy cat head. She has an obsession with her own human remains, keeping Gracie's skeleton locked in a heart-shaped bed in her dollhouse bedroom. She still quotes Gracie's lines about good toys and bad toys without knowing she is where they really came from. The person who erased everyone else's identity had her own erased, and she doesn't even know it. The prototype kept her alive but made her an outcast. She received the bare minimum rations to survive and was shunned by other experiments. In chapter 5, she captures us, Poppy, and Kissy and forces us into a tea party. We eventually crush her with a giant fake cloud during her chase sequence. The woman who brainwashed children into accepting life as a toy died as one herself. If that ain't poetic justice, nothing is. Before we get to the biggest theories of the video, we have an honorable mention. Riley. Throughout the early parts of chapter 4, we find journal pages scattered around the factory graveyard from a girl named Riley. She was 12 years old when her parents died in a fire, and 2 weeks later she was sent to Playcare. She hoped to be chosen, thinking it meant adoption, and in early 1995 she was chosen. She woke up days later in a body that wasn't hers, remembering flashes of being cut open and having her organs removed. And the employees locked her in a prison cell alone for months. When the hour of joy hit, Riley stayed in her cell listening through a hole in the wall. She ventured out after the noise stopped, found the toy graveyard, immediately panicked, and went right back. She found the crane operator dead and realized she was surrounded by other people who had also been turned into toys. She refused to eat the bodies of the dead employees to survive, and so, as her final act, she took the train key from the body of the conductor and hid it, hoping that if nobody could start the train, no one else would ever be brought down to the prison. We eventually find what's left, her decayed pink body with no limbs, sunken eyes, and the train key still inside her. She didn't survive, but she made sure that key would be there for whoever came next. No full chapter for Riley, no full boss fight, no dramatic death scene, just journal entries and a corpse that tells the whole story.
Your friend Huggy, Huggy Wuggy, squeeze you until you pop.
Huggy Wuggy is the most iconic experiment in the entire game, and after 5 chapters, we don't know for sure who he used to be, but there's one name that keeps coming up. Jeremy. In the Hartman incident tape from chapter 3, a married couple walks into Stella Graber's office ready to adopt an orphan named Jeremy. They've ridden Elliot's Express, heard his speech, and they're convinced that this is the orphanage they want to go through. Stella starts the paperwork and then stops because there's been complications. The form just says one word: testing. Stella doesn't even know what it means, and Miss Hartman starts panicking. Then Mr. Hartman demands an explanation, and all Stella can say is, "I'm sorry." Jeremy was already selected for experimentation. The family that wanted to give him a home never got a chance, and while the tape plays, Jeremy's face stares directly into the camera the entire time.
I understand you want to give Jeremy that home? Yes, and we would like to adopt. Amazing. You'll be perfect for... Oh.
On its own, the tape connects Jeremy to the usual orphan pipeline that fed the Bigger Bodies initiative. But then, on November 1st, 2025, Mob released a promotional video on Instagram with Theoryverse, and during one of the static moments, a child's face flashes on the screen, overlaid directly on top of Huggy Wuggy. That face is Jeremy from the Hartman tape, and behind him, text reads, "Help us." Mob doesn't hide things in split-second frames by accident, just like the prototype's face flashing in the Wrong Side Automos commercial. When they want you to see something, they make you work for it. Nothing is officially confirmed, but a kid who is pulled from adoption for testing, whose face Mob literally placed inside Huggy Wuggy with a cry for help behind it, is about as close to as confirmation as you can get without Mob saying nothing out loud. I can't breathe. Kissy Missy's identity is the biggest unsolved mystery in Poppy Playtime. Experiment 1172. 2 experiments after Huggy Wuggy, and created just days before Catnap in November 1990. She was made specifically to calm down Huggy, who was getting way too aggressive. We know she was an orphan. We know Playcare makes her tense. And after 5 chapters, we still don't have a name. What we do have is clues that keep contradicting each other. In chapter 3, inside Home Sweet Home, we find Kissy in her room staring at a photograph of a sad little girl. She's not looking at us. She's completely locked in on this picture, and 3 theories exist for who that girl is. First, a child from Playcare who Kissy bonded with as a toy and was separated from during the Hour of Joy. Second, a childhood friend from before she was turned into an experiment, like someone she shared a room with when she was still human. Third, and the most heartbreaking option, it's Kissy herself, looking at who she used to be before they took everything from her. Then there's the elevator in chapter 3. While riding up with us, Kissy cycles through different poses and animations. In one of them, she places her left hand over her right arm, the same nervous gesture she does every single time we see her. Now, when we look at the second official Poppy Playtime trailer for chapter 3, 4 kids are standing together, and the blonde girl on the far right is doing the exact same pose. If that's Kissy, then the boy on the far left with the matching shirt could be Huggy before his transplant. 2 kids standing next to each other in the photo turned into 2 experiments, just created 2 numbers apart. But here's the contradiction. The girl in the photograph has brown hair. The girl in the trailer has blonde hair. They can't be the same person. Either the photo is someone else entirely, the trailer girl is a red herring, or Mob is deliberately planting clues that don't line up to keep us arguing until chapter 6 finally gives us an answer. What we know for certain is this: Kissy was transported to Playcare on August 8th, 1995, the day of the Hour of Joy. When her straps were released on the cargo train, she killed the workers escorting her, but then she stopped. She went back to her original position and just sat there covered in blood. Every other experiment kept going. Kissy chose to stop. In chapter 5, when the prototype crushed Poppy's face, Kissy didn't hesitate. She was on that timing. She tore into the prototype with one arm and caused a massive release of red smoke. I don't even know what happened. Grabbed Poppy, who was clearly unconscious at this point, and ran off. And when she finally saw Huggy again and tried to calm him down, the prototype ambushed them both. She tried to reach for Huggy as the prototype stabbed her, and that's the last we see of her. We don't know her name, we don't know her face, but we know exactly who she is. The only experiment in the entire factory who was given every reason to be a monster and chose not to be. Whoever Kissy was before the transplant, that person is still in there, and she's been fighting to prove it since chapter 2. Over 1,400 experiments are on record at Playtime Co., and we've only just started putting names to numbers. Orphans, employees, a billionaire's daughter, and a crazy counselor who brainwashed them all. Every single one of them was a real person before Playtime Co. decided they'd be more useful as a toy. Some of their identities took 5 chapters to uncover. Others are still hiding in split-second frames and distant voices in the labs. And with a chapter 6 on the way and potential spin-offs in the series, the list is only going to get longer. The factory still has secrets, and we are not done yet. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.